and welcome to Dr. A for Animals, the podcast that gives you reliable answers to your questions about animal health and wellness and useful tools to help you help animals, whether in your own home or out in the wild. Together with expert guests, I'll give you information that is based on scientific research and clinical experience. I'm Dr. Charla Ansorge, a small animal and exotics veterinarian, and I'm so happy to share my love of animals with you. Let's get started. Welcome back to the show, my dear good listeners. Thanks for being here with me today. We're going to talk about some basics of animal behavior and a little bit of basics of training and behavior modification for dealing with problem behaviors in animals. So this is going to be a little bit of learning theory kind of information to partly clear up some meanings of terms that are misused a lot on social media and other places where I see them used, so that you'll have a better understanding of what exactly those terms mean. Lots of stuff like positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, that sort of thing I'm going to define so that you understand thoroughly what that means and how to use it in your day-to-day interactions with your animal friends and family. So it's important that we understand animal behavior in general for the animals that we live with in order to provide a happy and safe human-animal relationship. When we don't understand why an animal is behaving in a certain way, at best we can be missing filling an important need for an animal that lives in our home. And at worst, we can misinterpret their behavior and respond in a totally inappropriate way. And that can lead to anxiety, mistrust, and poor emotional health for our animals. And I do see this a lot, sadly, especially with cats, but because cats, and birds, are a little bit more complex and mysterious in their behavior, where dogs are very open to us and they have evolved with people in a different way, and they're social in a similar way that people are, whereas cats are social in a different way from people. So I do unfortunately see a lot of misinterpreting of behaviors in our homes. So when we work on behavior training, we're working on communicating, not controlling our animals. The point is communicating what we hope for them to do, and working with them in a way that they can learn to understand what we're asking of them, and also so that we can understand what they need from us. It's important to understand when we're working on behavior training, we are not making demands on our animals. We're making requests, and we're providing them with some incentive to respond in the way that we desire. So we want to keep that in mind when we're working on training or behavior modification if they're doing stuff that we don't like. So what is behavior? What does that even mean? It's anything that an animal does. It can be movement. It can be vocalizing, body language. It can be simple. It may be complex. One moment of an action, or it can be a series or group of smaller things that add up to a more complex behavior. Behaviors occur in order to achieve some outcome that the animal needs or wants. So that might be access to food, gaining a mate, access to shelter, or just comfort, or pleasure of some kind. So there's a stimulus of some kind, which might be feeling hungry. It may be elevated reproductive hormones, feeling cold, feeling uncomfortable. And then there's a response to that stimulus in the form of some kind of behavior. Animals are always telling us something, whether they intend to or not. And they may intend to. So it may be, the cat or dog waiting at the door, scratching at the door to be let in or out or vocalizing. Or it may be something more subtle where maybe they're not necessarily intending directly to try to tell us something, but they are behaving in a way that's meant to produce some kind of response in the environment that they live in. So this can be something like the cat peeing outside the litter box, that sort of thing, where they're doing that for a reason, and that reason is usually not what people think it is. People often think the cat's peeing outside the box because they're mad and they're trying to get back at the person, and that is almost never the reason. I can't say never, only because I don't know the thoughts of every cat in the world, but usually that is not why they're doing that. Anyway, behavior can change over time. It can be influenced in different ways. It certainly can be influenced from the get-go in a young animal by genetics, breed traits, instinct, imprinting, that sort of thing. So babies nursing or begging for food, precocial babies that are born, ready to run, that start foraging or following a herd very early on. Herding behaviors in dogs, these are, we breed for these. So these are breed-related traits that they will tend to do, even if we don't put a lot of effort into training them to do. Now, they'll get really good at it and know how to use this instinct in a very effective way if we work with them and train them. But they have it already kind of built in, the desire and sort of propensity to do it. And then there's environment and life experience. So this is the whole nature versus nurture effect on behavior. The nature is our genetics, instinct, that sort of thing. And environment and life experience is the nurture. So any kind of trauma or unpleasant experience can have a very profound effect on behavior. Reliable, pleasant experiences also can definitely shape behavior, and that it does take longer for a pleasant experience to make an impact on behavior, whereas a trauma or very unpleasant experience can have an immediate impact on behavior. And that goes back to evolution and selection for our safety. So that's self-preservation. If something really awful happens to you, your brain needs to remember not to get you in that situation again. And that's why really negative experiences tend to stick with us in a much more irritating and present way, maybe than a happy, joyful experience, which we can very much love at the time that it occurs and want to remember well. But we have to work a little bit harder to remember something that was actually nice rather than something that was kind of awful. Unfortunately, it's kind of a horrible way for us to have to exist, but it is the same for us and our animal friends. Now, when we're talking about normal behaviors versus a problematic behavior, context is important. So what's completely a normal behavior for a wild animal, like parrots chewing holes in trees for nesting or because they're looking for food in there, that can be a real problem when it's in a human home. that translates into parrots chewing on furniture, parts of the house, your books, everything that you have, your clothing. Cats and dogs urine mark in the wild, their wild ancestors, or the animals that are living in feral situations. Urine marking is a really important part of communication between animals, but it's not something we want happening in our homes. So it's not a bad behavior. The behavior itself is not a problem. It's the behavior occurring in a human household where we don't want it to occur that becomes a problem. So it's the context of the behavior that is making it a problem behavior. Now, there are other behaviors that are simply abnormal. An animal that is being quite suddenly aggressive for no apparent reason, where they're interacting normally and then quite suddenly they sort of turn Cujo and bite, or even snarl and lunge. I've seen this happen in some animals where they seem to be acting totally normally. There's no apparent stressful stimulus that occurs, but something switches and they become extremely aggressive all of a sudden. So that is an abnormal behavior. So what I've been kind of talking about there when we're talking about sort of stimulus and the shaping and building of behavior can be kind of packaged up in a behavior theory model known as the ABC model, and that's antecedent, behavior, and consequence. So the antecedent is the stimulus, the behavior is the action, and the consequence is a response or change that occurs due to that behavior. So an example of this would be an antecedent or stimulus being something in the environment like it's cold. I feel cold. So that is a stimulus. A behavior occurs. I snuggle under a blanket. And the consequence of that behavior is now I feel warm and comfortable. So, in an animal situation, this might be an antecedent occurs of the human asks the dog to sit. And the behavior occurs, the dog sits, and the consequence is the person gives the dog praise and or a treat. So there is a consequence of that behavior that then may have an effect on the potential for that behavior to continue to occur later. Another example would be a bird wants attention. from their person. So this is the stimulus. They're feeling like they want attention. The behavior that occurs is screaming to get attention. The consequence is variable. Ideally, the person leaves the room and totally ignores them. And that consequence of that behavior will affect that behavior in a different way than if the person screams back at the bird. So the stimulus, a need, a desire, this will drive the behavior initially. The consequence of the behavior will drive future behavior. So if it's a happy consequence, the behavior is more likely to occur again. If it's not a happy consequence, the behavior is less likely to keep reoccurring. So we use that when we are working on behavior modification or training. And that training can be, basic training of things I need you to do throughout the day. Like I need my dog to sit still while I put his collar and harness on. I need him to stay close to me when we're walking and not run in front of me over and over again so that I fall and break my neck. I need the cat to not jump on the dining room table. Well, not in my household. My cat does whatever he wants. But, there's that kind of training. There's trick training, which is just for fun. Teaching rats to drive taxis and things like that. All kinds of fun stuff that animals can learn to do. That some basic training is really important in our everyday lives with our animals because there's stuff that we need them to be able to understand from us, and there's stuff that we need to reliably understand from them in order to fulfill their needs that they can't verbalize to us. So I want to talk about positive and negative reinforcement and punishment, because these terms are used so inappropriately so often, and there's not a very good understanding just in general of what these terms mean, and they're very important to think about when we're working with our animals on a regular basis. So the very most important one that I think people have down a little bit better than the others, thankfully, because it is the one that we should be focusing on for the most part in our interactions with animals when we're trying to work with behavior, and that's positive reinforcement. So the really big thing here when we're talking about behavior and training is that positive doesn't mean good and negative doesn't mean bad. And that's where people get tripped up. Positive simply means we're adding something to the situation, and negative means we're removing something from the situation. Reinforcement means there's a likelihood that the behavior will increase and that we are trying to get the behavior to increase. Punishment means we're trying to get the behavior to decrease. So positive reinforcement means we're adding something to the situation to try to make this behavior occur more. So that means we're rewarding the behavior, basically. So, for instance, I go to my bird and I ask him to step up. He steps up on my hand and he gets praise and or a treat or scratches on the head or something that he likes. So he gets rewarded when he steps up on my hand. And I trained him to step up on my hand by using treats that he really wanted so that if he got on my hand, he got the treat. So now it's, pretty automatic that when I go, hey, step up, he steps up and he may get a treat or he may get something else that's pleasant for him. Another example might be the cat goes over and uses his scratching post that's next to the couch instead of scratching on the couch, and I give him praise, and I maybe give him a treat, and I tell him he's the best kitty in the world, and he feels really good. So he's more likely to then go back to the scratching post and not so much scratch on the couch. This is the best form of training. This is low stress in general, although there may be a little bit of stress if we're really focusing on training and we're trying to get a message through and we're doing repeated steps over and over. But it's the good kind of stress, and we need a little bit of that in order to change and learn. There needs to be a little bit of a stressor in order to make changes in the way the brain is wired. But positive reinforcement tends to build trust. There's a lot of, just to confuse things, positivity, and by that I mean good things, pleasant feelings, trusting and calm interactions, and joy. Oftentimes, because when we're focusing on trying to teach an animal behavior and they really get it, that's great for us too. It's great for them and it's great for us. So positive reinforcement is the major tool that we want to have in our toolbox when we're working with our animals. And that we use it every day. I mean, I ask my bird to step up every day. I tell my cat how awesome he is just all the time, even if he's just sitting there. But so he gets positively reinforced just for existing. So let's talk about negative reinforcement, because this one, I hear people use this a lot when what they mean is punishment. And that's not what negative reinforcement is. Negative, remember, means we're removing something from the situation, and reinforcement means we want the behavior to increase. So in order to get a behavior to increase by removing something, we're removing something unpleasant. And usually that means we've introduced something unpleasant in the first place. So this one is much more difficult to come up with examples for, and it's a tricky one to kind of describe. But this would be something like a lot of people will try to train their bird to step up on the hand by kind of shoving their hand into the bird's chest and saying step up, step up, step up over again, and kind of pushing physically until the bird finally steps up to get you to stop pushing on him. So he finally steps up. He does the behavior that we're looking for. He does it so that you'll stop pushing him. So you are doing an unpleasant thing, pushing, until he finally steps up. Okay, now you stepped up, and so I'm going to stop annoying you. So that is negative reinforcement. We've removed the annoying thing because he did the behavior that we were looking for. This might be something like you want the dog to go outside, but he doesn't want to go out. He's staying in. So you start making a bunch of loud noise and basically freak him out until he runs out the door. So then you stop making the loud noise. So you're doing this annoying thing of making the loud noise until he goes out, and then you stop making the loud noise. So then in the future, what this ends up being as an example of negative reinforcement is I'm going to make this loud noise until the dog runs outside. He runs outside to get you to stop making the loud noise. So that's negative reinforcement, and that is a terrible way to train. It's one of the worst things, aside from like horrible physical punishment, that you can use in order to train. So we want to try really hard to avoid that. And sometimes it's a pattern that people can slip into without realizing that they're doing it. So part of behavior management and training is, of course, training ourselves. And the first step of that is recognizing the things that we're doing that are really not a good approach and probably not building trust in a happy, healthy animal. So negative reinforcement, obviously, those things that I just described, that makes you very annoying and unpleasant to the animal. It's not a good way to learn, and it's not. It doesn't build trust and confidence and strengthen the bond between the person and the animal. So let's move on to negative punishment. And this is a weird one. People tend to associate badness with punishment. And punishment is not ideal, but this negative punishment is a better use than negative reinforcement. So again, negative, we're taking something away. Punishment means we want the behavior to decrease. So in this case, we're taking away something that the animal wants or likes in order to get them to stop doing something. So this might be when you were a kid, you're behaving badly, go to your room. You don't get to be out here and be social with everybody anymore. You have to go be in isolation now to try to get you to stop doing whatever bad behavior you were doing. So this might be like one dog has a toy, and the other dog is nearby, so the dog with the toy starts snarling and snapping at the other dog to keep him away from the toy. This is a bad behavior that we don't want. We want that behavior to decrease, so we remove the toy, so he no longer has a thing to protect from the other dog. He stops snarling and snapping. So that would be a negative punishment. We've taken away the thing that he wants in order to get him to stop misbehaving. And this is the example I mentioned earlier, the bird screaming for attention. Ideally, what you do is you quietly leave the room and ignore him. He doesn't get attention. So he wants your attention. And so instead of giving him more attention for doing the screaming, you walk away and completely ignore him for a little bit. Hopefully, eventually, he will stop screaming for attention because it doesn't work. Instead of getting the thing he wants, which is attention, he's getting left alone for 10, 15 minutes. So negative punishment is it's not ideal, but it would be kind of the second best thing to positive reinforcement. So in the kind of hierarchy of better training methods, negative punishment is a way to manage problem behaviors or unwanted behaviors in a way that's not harmful to the animal in any way and isn't going to damage trust or the bond between you. They might not like it, but it's not hurtful to them in any way. It's just like, oh man, now I don't have the thing I wanted, which kind of sucks, but you kind of brought that on yourself, kid. So that's more of a learning experience for them of, oh, well, this thing that I was doing isn't getting me what I want, so maybe I should stop doing that. It leaves them with the choice to change their behavior instead of trying to force a behavior on them. So negative punishment is kind of okay. Positive reinforcement is better. Negative reinforcement, not good. So, and let's go now to positive punishment. So this is going to be adding something unpleasant in order to try to make a behavior decrease. And we all know what this is. But this is classic punishment. The cat scratches the couch, you spray water in his face so he will run away and stop scratching the couch. The bunny's chewing on a chair leg and you smack him and push him out of the way and he starts avoiding the chair leg because obviously that was a very unpleasant thing to happen to him. This is really the worst form of training except for flooding, which I'm going to talk about later. I will say right now, never use physical harm with an animal. There's never a good reason to hit an animal, just never. If they're doing something that really bothers you or that hurts you, like they are biting you, that's definitely a problem and you need to intervene in some way. It's not a behavior that you can ignore and wait for them to stop and learn that it's an unrewarding behavior. But if that's happening, there's a communication and learning issue, and your job is to figure out what that is and try to fix it. And in a situation like that where you may be hurt by your animal, you probably need to seek professional help from a behaviorist and or really good trainer. We'll talk a little more about that later. But there's never a reason to hit an animal. I actually had a client come in once. It was a young couple, and the guy was asking me, he said, I need to ask you a question. Is it okay for me to smack the puppy on the nose with the rolled up newspaper when he's misbehaving? And he was looking very smug with himself because he was wanting me to tell him, yeah, that's fine, in front of his girlfriend. And I said, no, why would you do that? You need to work harder than that to train your puppy. Don't just wait for him to misbehave and then smack him. That's never okay. That's not going to teach the animal that there's a loving bond between you and that you will support him when he needs you, and that he has a good reason to do stuff that you would like him to do, because you're smacking him and he doesn't even get why. He's just being a puppy, doing normal puppy stuff, and all of a sudden he's being harmed. And it may not be being smacked on the nose with a newspaper, may not be like you're not breaking his nose or anything horrible like that. It's still super unpleasant and ow. Why are you hitting me all of a sudden? That's not going to build trust, and it's not going to make the puppy want to pay attention to you and do things that you're hoping that he will do. So positive punishment, not good. We want to avoid it as much as possible. And absolutely, if a positive punishment is being used, it should be as benign as possible. Something minimally aversive, a little spritz of water on the body or something that's just like, ew, I don't like that, but not harmful to the animal. Every once in a while, in order to, we need to break up a fight between animals without getting somebody bitten or something like that. We might have to use something like that, but we want to make it as minimally aversive as possible to just distract them and be able to safely get them out of an unsafe situation. So training in general should focus on reward-based methods, so positive reinforcement in general. We want to be able to reward an animal as much as we can. Like I said, if it's necessary to remove access to something the animal wants, especially if they're trying to perform a normal behavior, like parrots chewing on stuff, it's really important to give them another outlet. So you don't just remove stuff so that they don't have access to anything and they now can't do any form of the behavior that they were doing that you didn't like. So like the cat scratching on the couch. Deter them with double sticky tape so that, now it's not a pleasant experience for them to scratch on the couch, but ensure that they have a super awesome scratching post nearby and encourage them to use it and reward them for using it. For the bird that's chewing on stuff or the dog that's chewing on table legs or shoes or whatever, we can't just remove all of the stuff and not let them chew on anything. They have this very strong intrinsic desire to chew on stuff. So we need to give them something that's appropriate to chew on, reward them for chewing on that. And try to minimize their access to the things that we don't want them to chew on, but we must replace it with something else for them to do. They need to have stuff to do. They need to be able to do the behaviors that are sort of calling to them, and that are rewarding for them intrinsically. So we need to be able to provide an outlet for those kinds of behaviors rather than just expecting them to understand that we don't want them to do that and then just stop doing it. Well, what do they do? We can't just have our animals lying around doing nothing all day. What kind of a life is that for anyone? So, we have animals in our lives because we enjoy them and enjoy the behaviors that they engage in. So we need to make sure that we're providing options for them to engage in their normal behaviors. And sometimes it might be a behavior that we're not that interested in, but they still need to do it. So we need to give them something to do. So positive punishment and negative reinforcement both can create fear, anxiety. They can damage trust and the bond between the person and the animal. So those are the things that we mostly want to avoid. Negative punishment, so that's when we're removing the thing that the animal wants to get them to stop doing a bad behavior. So that's kind of our not as bad thing. Likely isn't going to lead to anxiety and fear. It doesn't do anything to build trust. It's not doing anything great for your bond with the animal, but it's probably not making anything worse. Positive reinforcement is the one that will support trust and build the bond. It's a team effort. It provides a supportive environment for healthy learning. It does take more time, and it definitely takes more patience, but it will lead to the most lasting changes in behavior and the best relationship between the animal and the person for the long term. So that's a kind of the summary of those general approaches to animal behavior and behavior modification. Another method of attempting to shape behavior or train an animal is called flooding. This also sometimes is referred to as exposure therapy to make it sound like it's not so horrible. But this is used when an animal is fearful or reactive to some stimulus, and it involves prolonged and or repeated exposure to that probably very high intensity stimulus without any possibility of escape. So this is sort of like birds. Birds very commonly are afraid of something new, like a toy or an object or something. So this is like forcing that object on the bird up close, right in their face, repeatedly for a long period of time until the bird stops reacting. So, and they may stop reacting because they're exhausted. They may be panting. They may be cowering in a corner, but they finally stop reacting. And the reason that they stop reacting is it's called learned helplessness. This is a mental state where the animal has learned that their actions cannot change the outcome. And that happens after significant repeated stress without any escape. And it leads to this passive sort of apathetic behavior. So the animal may seem like they are now compliant in this state, but they're experiencing very severe stress. It's so emotionally and psychologically damaging, and it absolutely destroys trust and confidence. I mean, if you think about that, how would you feel about a person who did that to you? Would you trust and love someone who forced something really scary? Say you're like me and you're arachnophobic, and somebody just kept throwing spiders on you. I'm laughing about it, but that would be absolutely horrible. Someone that I loved was like, I'm going to make you not scared of spiders anymore by just pushing spiders in your face constantly and holding you down so that you cannot escape. I would absolutely hate that person for the rest of my life. I would want nothing to do with them, and I certainly would not want to do things that they wanted me to do. And if I did, it would be because I was a captive and had no other choice. Is that how you would want your animals to live in your home? Please, 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 never use this technique. And many people don't realize that they're doing this. They think that this is a way to get an animal desensitized and used to something, but this is not how you desensitize. And I will talk about how you desensitize in a safe and effective way. This should absolutely be avoided always. Do not flood and do not cause learned helplessness. This is one of the most damaging things that you can do to an animal or another person. And please don't anyone start throwing spiders at me. So since positive reinforcement is our gold standard for training, for behavior modification, I just want to talk about a couple of examples and sort of how it's done. So this is something like asking your dog to sit, and he sits and he gets a treat. Asking the bird to step onto the hand, he steps onto your hand and he gets a treat. Getting your rabbit to come to you when you call them. Getting your cat to come to you, and good luck. Getting the cat to use the scratching pose, that sort of thing. When we're using positive reinforcement, consistency is extremely important, and the timing of your reward is extremely important. So when you are asking the animal to do the behavior, when they even get close to that behavior initially, you want to give them a reward immediately. So they make the connection that that thing that they did is what they're getting rewarded for. If you can't get to a reward immediately, if you got a fumble in your pocket, or it takes a second, because you want that reward to come within seconds of them doing the behavior that you're looking for, you need to use some other cue, a consistent cue that the animal is familiar with, that they know means a reward is coming. And then you always will follow that cue with a reward. That's how clicker training works. So the click of that marks the behavior. So you can have that clicker in your hand as soon as they do the thing you want, and then you fumble for your treat and give it to them. They know because you spend some time initially with just the clicker going clicker, treat, clicker, treat, clicker, treat. And they learn, whenever I hear that sound, now I get a treat. And that this is classical conditioning, which is another part of learning theory, that when you consistently pair the click sound with the treat, the animal learns that the click sound means a treat is coming. So then you can have a little clicker in your hand. And when we're working on the behavior, as they start making steps toward that behavior, each step towards it, we get a click, and then we give the treat as soon as we can get the treat to them. But the click can come immediately. So it's not like in Jurassic Park where the guy is like clicking at the velociraptors, like clicking in their faces, like the clicker is going to make them behave in some way. That is not how clicker training works. God, that made me crazy. I saw that scene. I thought, could you do a little bit of research, learn how clicker training actually works? Anyway, types of rewards that we can use when we're doing positive reinforcement training are quite variable. It doesn't have to be a food treat. If you have an animal that's not very food motivated, then treats are probably not going to work. So you need to figure out what motivates them, what's rewarding to that particular animal. For a lot of animals, it is food, and treats are easy, and they're highly rewarding for a lot of animals. So that is an easy way to go. But for an animal that's not super food motivated, or if they're obese and we're working on weight management, if you are using treats, we need to make room for that in the daily diet. But we can also use toys. If they have a really favorite toy, we can use just praise for animals that really respond to praise and get really happy about you being like, wow, you're so great. What a good baby. That can work really well for some animals. For some, it's brushing or petting. It may be the thing that they are wanting to do anyway, which might be access to outdoors. So if you're trying to train your cat to wear a harness, which can be very challenging with some kitties, but they really want to go outside. If they get to go outside when they have the harness on, that in itself can be the reward. It can be access to some other activity that they want. So when we're using positive reinforcement training, we want to, like I said, be consistent. So schedule sessions, know when you're going to do it and how many days a week and how much time you have to do it. And you want sessions to be short. We want them to be pleasant, and we want them to be frequent. So if you do it like once a week and you're like, I'm going to spend 20 minutes training my cat once a week, that's probably not going to go great because your cat is going to be tired of what you're doing way sooner than 20 minutes. You may get 1 to 2 minutes, depending on the animal. You may get 5 minutes. 5 minutes is great. 2 minutes is great. If that's all you get, you're going to need to do it probably 5-6 days a week. And you try to do it kind of around the same time of day if you can. That doesn't have to be, but if possible, so that your animal starts to kind of expect like, oh, we're going to spend this time together, and you're going to ask me to do some stuff, and I'm going to get some treats or whatever. You want to set them up for success from the beginning. So manage the environment. Try to minimize distractions, and definitely no discomfort. So we want them to be in an area that they're comfortable with. If you're trying to do some training with an animal in a busy room with kids running around or a lot of noise happening, it's probably not going to go well. If you have like a bunch of birds and you're in the bird room and all the birds are, like it's going to be so distracting. You need to move the bird that you're trying to train into a different room. If you have two animals, you've got two rambunctious puppies and they're playing with each other and they're being crazy, they're probably not going to pay attention to you. So you may have to go one at a time. We're going to go in another room for 5 minutes, work on training, and then we'll switch out to the other puppy. You also need to first recognize and then respect when an animal says no. When they have had enough, when they're not comfortable with what you're doing, especially if they're fearful at all, we need to be compassionate. We need to be understanding. If they're fearful or nervous, we absolutely must not force the training on them. If they're nervous of whatever it is we're trying to introduce, we need to take it very slowly and we back off as soon as we see that they're nervous. As soon as, they're acting like, I don't know what you want from me, I'm frustrated, anything like that, then we need to back off. If there's a step where they're doing well, we want to go back to that step and reward it before we finish, if possible. But if the animal is just going like, I'm really not into this, we're not going anywhere, then trying to force the training is not going to get you anywhere. What you want to do is catch the behavior that you want, or gently direct the animal to the behavior that you want, taking it in tiny little baby steps. These are referred to as approximations, rather than expecting like a whole perfect behavior to happen all at once. So I'm going to go back to the training the bird to step on your hand because it's one I have a lot of experience with. When I am first training a bird that has never learned, hey, step up, I don't go put my hand in front of them, say step up, and expect them to step up onto my hand, of course. I put my hand towards them, and if that scares them, I back my hand off and hold it in front of them at the distance where they seemed comfortable. I will just hold my hand there and then, okay, here's your treat. Here's whatever your reward is. Here's a little treat. I'm just going to hold my hand here. Now maybe I'll drop my hand for a second. I'll lift it back up. And if you don't react to that, I'm going to give you another treat. And now maybe I'll move my hand a little closer to you. And if you're okay with that, we get another treat. If you're not okay, I move back to where we were and reward you again. And once you're okay with me getting closer to you, if I can get my hand close enough that I can maybe just lightly touch your toe and you're okay with that, I'm going to give you treats. If you're not okay and you are pulling away from me, I'm going to back off, back to the point where you were okay. And then I'm going to give you treats. And then maybe we've gotten to the point where you're comfortable with me. I put my hand up. I'm going to hold the treat a little further away so that you have to reach across my hand to get it. Okay, now you get your treat. If you reach across my hand and that doesn't scare you, you're not uncomfortable with it, we're going to give you the treats. And now maybe we're doing well with that, so I'm going to pull the treat a little further away so that you actually have to take a little step and rest your toes on my hand. Then I'm going to give you a treat. Okay, now we're going to do that a few times, and then when we're comfortable enough with that, I'm going to try to pull a little further away so that you'll put your whole weight on that foot. And then I'm going to give you treats. And we're going to do that a bunch of times. And then once we're really good at that, I'm going to ask you to put your second foot on my hand. So you see where this is, I'm not expecting them to just step right up. We take it in tiny, tiny little steps, always watching how the animal is responding, what their body language looks like. If they're leaning away from me or they're trying to get away from what I'm doing, I'm going to back off because I don't want them to feel uncomfortable. I want them to know we're going to go at your pace. This is supposed to be pleasant for you. The whole point of getting you to do this is so that we can interact with each other more and enjoy each other's company. And so that if I need you to do this when there's an emergency, you will do it without it being uncomfortable, and without us, without me having to chase you. If I need you to get on my hand because a door has blown open and I don't want you to fly out the door and get lost, I need to be able to quickly pick you up and put you in your cage or whatever. I want you to be able to do it and feel comfortable and safe, that stepping up on me is a safe thing and it's a positive interaction for us. And by positive here, I mean good. So you want to immediately reward that first impulse towards the behavior and then progressively ask for a little bit more and reward at each level until they finally reach that full behavior. And then we just want to practice the full behavior kind of regularly and make sure that we're rewarding. And then we may start to kind of vary the reward. So, one of my birds I've had for 26 years, and he doesn't get a treat every single time he steps up on me. But he wants to step up on me, and he'll even lean towards me and be like, "Murr." So occasionally he'll say something that sounds sort of like step up, but my bird, he's not a huge talker. But a lot of birds actually will learn to say step up, and they'll say it to you because they want you to come over so they can step up on you. Lots of animals will start presenting behaviors to you that they have learned because they want you to give them some reward. So they're either coming to you to try to get attention, or they want a treat. My bird says pretty clearly, want a treat. So that one he's learned pretty well. Now, if we get incorrect behaviors or an unwanted behavior, we just ignore that. If we can, we sort of redirect it. But if they're just not doing the thing we want, we just kind of wait. And then we try the cue again. So if my cue is step up, and they're turning around and turning their back on me, I'll kind of wait and see if they turn back around. If they don't, maybe I'll walk around and be in front of them again, and then try the cue again, step up. And if they didn't just keep, the bird keeps turning around, he's like, I'm done with you. Well, we're just done for the day. He has lost patience with me. He's not interested. He's full. He doesn't want any more treats. Then, okay, that session is done for today. And maybe it only lasted 1 minute. That's okay. We got a little bit of time in. We want it to be pretty predictable and part of our just regular routine. Regular interaction with the animal makes it so that they expect it. They're ready for it, and they're eventually probably in a more positive state because they're starting to learn. The more success they have and the more they're getting rewarded, they start to understand what it is you're asking of them. And that's a really good feeling in general. Just like when you are trying to learn something and you finally get it, you're like, oh my gosh, that's so great. I learned this new skill. I suspect that animals feel the same way. They're like, oh, that's what you want. Okay, I got this. This is great. And now we understand each other better. Like I said, we have to be reading the animal's body language. So it is important that you have some understanding of your animal's body language. In dogs, tail position can mean a lot. And it can be tricky because if we have a nice upright wagging tail, that is usually a happy dog. Their tail is going back and forth, or helicoptering, that sort of thing is happy. But they can have this tail sort of semi-upright wagging tail position when they're nervous. So you have to kind of observe your dog and sort of learn in what situations, like when they're meeting another dog and they're kind of, maybe their hackles are up just a little, their ears are very upright, their body is a little bit tense, and their tail is wagging. That's not a happy wag. It doesn't mean they're unhappy, but it's more of a tense wag. So it's important to kind of learn the difference in what that looks like in your dog, what a relaxed, happy wag looks like. And if they're wagging their whole butt, the whole hips are going side to side, they're happy. So ear position also, if the ears are very upright and sort of tense, that can be, a dog that's a little bit nervous. If the ears look nice and relaxed, that's a good thing. So, if the ears are kind of riding a little bit lower on the head, now sometimes, dogs will perk up their ears when they're just listening to you. So you just, again, have to kind of get to know your dog and their body language. In dogs, lip licking and yawning are often signs that they're nervous, though. If they're repeatedly yawning in a situation where, like, they're obviously not sleepy, that's nervousness. So if, they start doing a lot of that, or lip licking, or kind of looking at you side eye, those all can be signs of nervousness in a dog. For cats, tail flicking is a big one. So if you're interacting with your cat and the tail starts this kind of sharp little flick, sometimes they'll do a little kind of side to side sort of sinuous movement with the tail, and sometimes it's more of a quick flick. Both of those can be signs that they're getting a little agitated. If their pupils are kind of dilating, that can also mean that they're agitated. Ear position can be a little more tricky. I don't expect cats to be flattening like airplane ears with you when you're doing training work, because that is a really upset cat. So I don't expect you to be seeing that. If you're seeing that, if they're putting their ears fully down, or growling or anything, like they are not into it. And that definitely, they should not be getting to that level when we're doing like training interactions. If their ears are kind of rotating back behind them, or, off to the side, it may just mean that they're not really focusing on you. They're kind of listening to other stuff. So that may be kind of a first indication that they're losing interest in what's happening. If they have their ears towards you, they're looking at you or towards your hands or whatever you're doing, you've got their attention. But your animal should have a nice, relaxed kind of look about them. For birds, feather position is important. So they shouldn't be kind of flaring the feathers in their face, or if they have a crest, if they're flaring the crest, they're getting kind of excited or agitated, and that's not really where we want them to be when we're doing training. If you have a bunny that starts thumping, they're not comfortable, like they're getting agitated. If for any animal, if they're like leaning away or just trying to walk away from you when you're trying to do behavior work, they're nervous and uncomfortable, because, if you're introducing something new to them, like an object or something that they're kind of scared of, that means we need to back off. If they're like just turning around and walking away, they're just maybe not interested. So it may just be the mood they're in, something more interesting is happening somewhere else, or we don't have a rewarding enough reward. So it may just be a matter of identifying something that's more rewarding for them that will make them want to stay and learn what it is you're trying to teach them. So definitely we want to look for signs of stress and recognize if we have an animal that's getting kind of stressed by our interaction, because we don't want it to be an unpleasant interaction. We also don't want them to, scratch or bite, especially, birds and some of the small mammals might be a little bit more apt to bite if we're trying to handle them and work with them when they don't want it. So be respectful of the animal's no. If they're saying no, like learn to recognize that, and it can be a little different in every animal. So you just got to be paying attention and figure out what the signs are in that particular animal, that they're done, they're not interested, they don't want to do this. And we need to respect that. And if that just keeps happening and they're just not being receptive to training, we need to change our approach. We need to find a more desirable reward, that kind of thing. So another kind of an offshoot of using positive reinforcement training is desensitization and counter conditioning. So desensitization is getting an animal comfortable with a stimulus that they find aversive or scary in some way. So something unpleasant that they are going to be exposed to, that we need them to get kind of more comfortable with. We want to desensitize them to that stimulus. Counter conditioning is building a different response to that stimulus. So not just, okay, it doesn't really scare me anymore, but, oh, actually, this is kind of a good thing. So we're reprogramming their response to this aversive stimulus. So we begin by trying to reduce fear and anxiety, and then we add in a significant reward to create a new pleasant association with whatever that stimulus is that they find aversive. So a great example of that is dogs and thunder. A lot of dogs are afraid of thunder or fireworks, or these loud noises happening in the environment. And the way that we start with desensitizing is we start with a recording of thunder. We'll use thunder rather than fireworks, and use the recording at a very low level where the dog isn't really nervous. We want to see that they can hear it, but it's not big and scary to them. So they're like, oh, I'm hearing the sound, but it's so quiet that's not very scary. And then we're giving them a reward. So, when I hear the quiet thunder noise, it's actually like I get treats, or I get to play with my favorite chew toy or something like that. So this is something where you don't have to go, take a step and give a treat, another step, give a treat, another step, give a treat. You can be just kind of giving them treats or give them a toy. If it's like, oh, I really love this toy, we can be playing the recording at a very low level, maybe across the room from the dog, and have him with his very favorite toy that he just loves, or we're brushing if he really loves being brushed, or we're giving treats. And then we gradually are increasing the volume gradually increasing. And then if he starts to show signs of anxiety, we're backing off. If he's like, oh, what's that? We back off. We reduce the volume back down, and we make sure that we try to refocus him on the pleasant thing that he likes. Now, if he is reacting and like, I just want to leave the room, then we're done. We're done with training for that session. We don't want him to get to a point where he's getting scared and nervous. We want him to know he has a choice. We're not going to force this on him. He can walk away. And then we do, again, make it predictable. We're going to do another session, the next day or within a couple of days. And then that's how we're doing our desensitization and counter conditioning is, every session, we're going to start back kind of one step back from where we were last time, where he was nice and comfortable, and then gradually increase the intensity of that stimulus to the point where now he knows, okay, the next thunderstorm that happens, I'm going to get like some really great treat, or I'm going to get my favorite toy, and I'm just going to hang out and enjoy the thunder. So that's the idea behind desensitization and counter conditioning. And you can use this for all kinds of things, birds that are afraid of a new toy. We start with the toy kind of being several feet away, maybe on a counter that's nearby. And walk by and pick up the toy and like, oh, isn't this a cool toy? Oh, hey, honey, here's a treat. I've got the toy. Look at this toy. I'm ringing the little bell. Isn't it neat? Here's a treat for you. Oh, isn't this great? And then the next day, we come over and we pick up the toy and we move it just a little bit closer to the point where they're not reacting to it. And then a little bit closer, a little bit closer. If they're showing comfort enough with it, we maybe stick it on the outside of their cage, make sure that they're okay with it being there. We're giving them treats, we're telling them how great it is. Eventually, getting it inside the cage or where, on their play stand or wherever it is that they're going to play with that toy. And hopefully they will then approach it and play with it and have fun. But again, reading body language, watching for signs of fear, anxiety, always backing off if they're showing the first sign that they're not comfortable, so that they know this isn't going to get forced on them. It's not going to hurt them. They have a choice to walk away if they feel like they need to. There are some pretty common mistakes that can be made when we're trying to work on behavior modification or doing training. So I'm going to go over a few of those so that you can be aware and be kind of thinking about those. One of them, of course, is not understanding the animal's signals of discomfort or stress, or boredom. All of those are important to be looking for and to respond to. So, like I said, if they seem stressed at all, we need to back off. If they're just bored, they're not interested, we need to kind of up the game for them and make it more interesting for them. Expecting too much too fast is a big one. So again, we're taking training in tiny little baby steps. We're taking desensitization in tiny little baby steps, always watching to see how they're responding. And if they're doing well, we go to the next step. We make it a little bit more challenging, or, we increase the volume on the scary noise, that sort of thing. Again, not using a desirable enough reward can be a problem. So make sure that we have identified a reward that they really love. And when we're really doing focused training, it's a good idea to only give that thing during training sessions. So if they have an absolute favorite treat and you need to train them to do something, or you're working on, building a behavior that you need them to do regularly, we only get that treat when we're doing training sessions. Inconsistency between family members is a big one. So if we have, one person that's doing a good job of ignoring the screaming bird and the other person is screaming back at the bird every time they scream, we're not going to get anywhere. The bird's getting major mixed signals. They're getting what they want from one person, basically, and so they're going to keep trying that on the other person. Accidentally rewarding an unwanted behavior is huge. So we want to be careful to not use a reward as a distraction from a bad behavior, because what will happen is we will accidentally be rewarding the bad behavior. So I once walked into an exam room with a really cute Australian Shepherd who immediately snarled and lunged at my throat. I mean, she came at me at like 60 miles an hour, right at my throat. And the client grabbed her and gave her a treat. And I was like, whoa, what's happening here? And she said, she protects me. She does it to my husband at home all the time. But she'll stop doing it if I give her treats. And I was like, I had to sit her down and explain to her, what you're doing is actually rewarding her for lunging and snarling at people because you're giving her a treat immediately when she does that behavior. So you're actually giving her a reward. And we accidentally do that a lot, using some kind of a thing that they want to distract them, because we think we're distracting them from the bad behavior, but what we're doing is rewarding them for the bad behavior. So you may find that the distraction that you use works in that moment because they want the thing that you're giving them, but they don't ever stop doing the behavior. They keep doing it because you keep rewarding them for doing it. So be careful if you're accidentally rewarding that. And of course, one of the biggest ones is using punishment or flooding instead of teaching alternatives for trying to deal with behaviors that you don't want.
We also want to be careful to avoid just rewarding the wrong behavior, because while that may not be detrimental, like the previous example that I gave of rewarding the bad behavior, we may just not get anywhere in our training because we're rewarding the wrong behavior. And the way that this happens usually is that we're not providing the reward quickly enough. So I talked earlier about how we need to give the reward within seconds of the behavior that we're looking for. And if we can't do that, we need to have some kind of a bridge, like the click sound or some other sound, which could be a verbal "good boy" or something like that, that marks the behavior so that we can then get the reward and get it to the animal. So one of the places where I see this happen a lot is in potty training puppies. So we take the puppy outside, we give them a cue like "go potty," we wait for them to go, they go, we're like, great, we go in the house and give them a treat. So we now just rewarded them for going in the house. We didn't actually reward them for going potty when we asked them to. So it's important to have the reward with you when you know you're going to be doing some kind of training. And so say we go out with the puppy, we say go potty, then they go. As soon as they're done, good boy, good potty, and we give them the treat right away. So we have to be careful that we're marking the behavior very quickly with the treat. Now, if we are using a bridge like a clicker or something like that, that doesn't mean that we can give the signal and then 5 minutes later when we go in the house, we give the reward. The reward still has to come pretty quickly after the bridge cue that we've used. So if we're using a clicker, we do the click immediately, and then we have a few seconds to fumble and get our reward, whatever it is. There can't be like minutes in between that signal and the reward. And another one, just kind of in general overall, would be not meeting the animal's basic needs. So they need exercise, they need enrichment, they need social interaction, and they need sleep. So if we're trying to do training behavior stuff late at night, when they're tired, for an animal that is active during the day, that's not going to work well. If they're not getting good nutrition and they don't feel good, we're not going to get anywhere with behavior training, and we're not probably going to have the most well-behaved animal. If it's a young, active, healthy animal and they're not getting very much exercise, they're going to be hyper. So if you have a puppy or a young cat who's hyperactive when you're at home or when you're trying to sleep, are they getting enough playtime and attention when you're home and awake? Is the dog getting out to run around a lot? Are you playing with the cat? They need interactive playtime and they need to run around and be crazy. And ideally know the normal, circadian rhythm of the animal that you're living with. So dogs are mostly active during the day. Cats are mostly active during early morning and late night. Not so much in the middle of the night. That's called crepuscular, sort of a dawn and dusk activity pattern. So we want to make sure, like right before bed, that you play hard with your young, energetic cat so that they'll get a lot of playtime, they'll get a lot of exercise, and then hopefully be kind of tired by the time that you're tired and ready to go to bed. Are you keeping your bird awake late at night by having lights on or playing music or watching loud TV so that they can't get sleep? Birds need roughly about 10 hours of sleep a night, and they need darkness. They need to not have lights in their face. That's true for us too. We need to not have lights on at night. It's very disruptive to sleep. So make sure that your diurnal, the daytime animals, are getting enough darkness and quiet at night so that they're getting good sleep. Because if they're always being kept awake because we're
walking around making a lot of noise or still watching TV and we're in the same room as them and they're not getting enough sleep, they're going to be cranky and they're not going to be able to focus and pay attention. So make sure that we are meeting their basic needs before we go and try to work on behavior issues. If we're not covering for good nutrition, exercise, solid sleep, good social interaction, interactive play, cuddling time, if those things are not being met, we have no business even trying to work on a behavior issue, because just meeting those needs might solve whatever, if there's a behavior problem, just meeting those needs might solve it. Understanding what's normal behavior and when an animal needs an outlet for a normal behavior that we might consider a problem in our home is hugely important. And building a bond of trust and learning to communicate with our animals is so important to their mental health, and also to their safety. So, if we do have an emergency, we need to have an animal that understands what we're asking of them and trusts us enough to come with us if there's a fire in the house or there's a flood coming or something awful. Well, hopefully never any of that happens to any of you. But if we need to get our animal into a harness or a carrier or something quickly and easily, being able to work on training them to do that beforehand is incredibly helpful. If they are injured and we need to get them to the vet, knowing that they can get into their carrier without it being a super horribly stressful situation is huge. So working on those kinds of behaviors can be incredibly helpful. And being compassionate in our training strengthens their trust and their confidence for their lifetime. It makes a huge impact. So I hope I was able to clarify in particular some of the terms that are misused out there and gave you sort of a basis for approaching training. There's a lot more information out there. And in some cases, if you have a very difficult situation with an animal who's biting or being aggressive, who is just, their behavior is just kind of over the top and you don't know how to manage them or you just can't get their attention. In some cases, those animals, especially if they do have really significant anxiety, they may need some medication to help them be calm and relaxed enough to be receptive to training. And you may need, so for that, obviously, you need to go talk to your vet. But you may also need some guidance with an experienced behaviorist or trainer. So, if you do need to look for a trainer, you always want to be looking for trainers that are using positive reinforcement and force-free methods. So if you're looking at working with a trainer and they are using these kind of dominance interactions, telling you to like roll the dog over on their back and hold them, that sort of thing, or withholding food, anything that seems to be aversive to the animal, I would run from that. That's not the kind of training methods that we want to use. We want to use, gentle direction and positive reinforcement, giving rewards, building the bond and building trust. And making sure that the animal knows that they have options, they have choices, they have agency in this situation with their human person that they live with, that they can make a choice to work with us, and they can make a choice to leave if they're really not feeling comfortable. Making sure that they have those options is incredibly important for their mental health, their confidence, their comfort, and their desire to be with us. We want them to want to be with us the way that we want to be hanging out with them. So when you are looking for someone to work with, you want to just make sure that they are focusing on, yes, we use force-free methods. We are focusing on guiding the animal into behaviors that we're looking for, or getting them comfortable with something that they're nervous about and rewarding them. We want it to be all about rewards and building trust and comfort for the animal. Thanks so much for listening. Stay tuned for the next episode and go give your cute little critters hugs for me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Dr. A for Animals. This podcast is for educational purposes and does not substitute for specific medical advice for an individual animal or constitute the practice of veterinary medicine. No veterinary client-patient relationship is formed through listening to the podcast.
If you have an animal in need of medical care, please see their veterinarian.